Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Mad Science Lab on the Fantasy Football Universe. I am Aaron St. Dennis at FF Mad Scientist on all social media, joined today by Mike Lindberg, aka Grindberg. What's your Twitter? You don't have your Twitter handle on there. What is it?
It's at FF Canuck 99.
Oh, yeah, that's it. I was like, is it at Grindberg? I'm like, oh, no, you're Canuck. I should have known that because I, too, am Canadian. So
You bet.
think I would have remembered that. But where are you? We've had this conversation, but...
I'm right in the heart central of Winnipeg, so right in the heart of the prairies in central Canada.
Yeah, you're
not much going on here.
You're nowhere near me. I'm basically Detroit. So I've had this conversation with every once in a while. Someone comes up and it's like, oh, shit, you're in Canada too. And then everyone's like, hey, do you know this guy? He's Canadian. I'm like, yeah, he's the equivalent of if I'm in New York and he's in Seattle. We're in the same country, but I'm like, I'm closer to some of my buddies down here in Ohio. So
exactly. It's funny.
Then it's funny because we had one where it turned out Jack Kavanaugh, who I'm friends with from Player Profiler, he was one from Canada. Turns out he's like 30 minutes down the highway from me. I'm like, oh, I hang out there. So some of them are nearby. You are not nearby. You're not just down the street.
No, I'm probably as far away from any other creator in the fantasy space than anybody. I'd say, like, I know a handful of Canadians. They're all either on the West Coast or the East Coast. It's very few of us that are in the middle. So if you know any, send them my way. I'd like to connect.
How'd you end up Chiefs? Just the team directly below you on the map?
No, actually, the Vikings are directly below me. And actually, I was growing up a Viking fan, to be honest, but it wasn't until my son was born that I really got into the Chiefs. He was just always a Chiefs fan, and he got me into it. And I just been following them for the last, 8 to 10 years, I'd say. But growing up, I was kind of like being close to Viking country. You're always exposed to them, but you're never kind of in bed with any team as a Canadian unless you're like, really, close to them. So Chiefs came up when my kid was born, and he's been a diehard fan, and I just kind of followed along with him, and now we're both following them. I went to a game last year. We went to training camp last year. We saw Mahomes, in St. Joseph. So it was really cool to, see that environment, and we were right involved there. So yeah, that's where my Chiefs passion comes from.
I was Lions because literally I could see, I can see Ford Field, but I couldn't see the Pontiac Silverdome, but I'm close enough that I can see Detroit. So it was always Detroit growing up. 99 barely left, and I fucking just hated the team. The Matt Millen years killed it for me. I stopped watching football. When I came back in probably 2006, my first year coming back watching football, because I'm Canadian. It's all hockey for me. But my first year of football, my buddy at work got me into a fantasy football league, and it was Drew Brees' first year. Might have been 07, whatever it was his first year in New Orleans. And just by dumb luck, I had Drew Brees, Marcus Colston, Jeremy Shockey, Reggie Bush, a whole shitload of just randomly. I just drafted whatever the top guy was because I knew nothing, and it was all Saints. So I ended up cheering for them, and that's how I became a Saints fan, just being a degenerate fantasy football player. So, and then Drew Brees retired, and now I'm kind of, it's like, I like the Saints. I like the Lions. I like my fantasy football team more. So I'm kind of a man without a team in football. But before we get into it, you want to tell everyone where they can find you and your work?
Yeah, I've been pretty spread out these days. I'm doing a lot of work. I do a Chiefs-specific show, and I represent the Undroppables doing that. So you can find my Chiefs-specific show on the Chiefs Uncovered on the Undroppables Network. I do work for Player Profiler. I have a show there called Player Profiler News Primetime with a co-host, Jeremiah Retzlaff, and I work on the news desk for them. And then I have another co-host, Biggs, and we do work for Fantasy Football Advice Network. We have the Fantasy Forecast, and then we also have the Dynasty Pulse. So we've got 2 podcasts rolling on 2 different networks, and then I have my own podcast through the Undroppables with the Chiefs Uncovered. So pretty busy these days, but it's always good to connect with a fellow Canadian and talk Chiefs ball.
Oh, you're doing the exact opposite of me. My first year of really doing this, I expanded. I was everywhere. I was Player Profiler, DLF, FFAN, King Fantasy Sports League. I must have worked for 8 places at one point. IDP guys. This offseason, we started up our own thing, and I just said, you know what? I'm not doing anything anywhere else. And I still work for a lot of these places and do the occasional piece, but I just don't have the time. And a lot of them, it wasn't worth the time for me. It was just, I'd spend all this effort, put in a piece, and it would end up being published 12 days later. And it's like, well, that was useless. So I put my effort into one thing, and that's what we're doing the FFU. So you're the exact opposite. You're expanding on
exactly
everything here. But let's get into the Chiefs. We have the quarterback situation is the easy one to. If Carson Wentz is playing, we have a problem, and Mahomes is dead. Mahomes finished QB7 last year, going QB3 off the board this year. I'm going to let you talk about the QB room here, but I don't know really what to say here about Patrick Mahomes that we don't already know. Like, this is probably the most boring start to a show ever. Tell me why Patrick Mahomes is awesome. Like, I don't know.
I mean, it's one of those things. I mean, last year he struggled. We know that, he wasn't as prolific in the years past. That's 2 years removed from Tyreek Hill. And I think that him blossoming as a quarterback really happened in the last 2 years, being able to manage the team in a different way. His emotions went forward last year a little bit. We saw some frustration there. And I think the team addressed what they were looking for in helping him get some weapons around him. They got some 2 burners on the outside now that they can really open up the field and in the middle for like a guy like Travis Kelce. So I think Mahomes is going to have a really good bounce back year. ADP 3 is pretty rich for my blood at this stage, seeing what the last 2 years has brought in Mahomes and the Chiefs. I'm willing to, I'm thinking he's going to finish around the quarterback 5 or 6, similar to where he finished last year. He's going to have some better numbers, but I just think some of these running quarterbacks are going to start slipping into the top 5 a little bit more. We're going to see a guy maybe like Anthony Richardson, CJ Stroud still going to be looking pretty good. So I got Mahomes in that group there. But ADP 3, I think it's going to be pretty hard for him to attain that ADP even if all things go to play for him.
I think I have him as QB 5, 6 if it's a run heavy format like Scott Fishbowl, because then I bump Anthony Richardson up. But he's pretty. Having said that, in Dynasty he's my 1 because I'm in Dynasty. I'm rushing quarterback adverse. I treat them like running backs, but in redraft he's probably my 5. I've got Allen, Hurts, Lamar, CJ Stroud, and then, like I said, based on format, it's either him or Richardson. So nothing too spicy there. I expect to bounce back, but even when he has a bad season, he wins the Super Bowl. So I guess it's not that bad. No running back room is a collection of players. We'll call them that. Isaiah Pacheco leads the way, RB13 last year, going as RB13 this year. I have a few shares of him. He goes not all that early, not all that late, right around the RB2 range. I'm worried that despite the fact that this looks to be his backfield, those day 3 or undrafted, the low draft capital running backs, just because they have one big blow up season doesn't mean anything. Like we've seen this with Dameon Pierce. I don't expect that to happen. I'm just always kind of worried that he's easily replaceable. Then he's followed up here with Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Keontae Ingram, and Imani Bailey, Deneric Prince, and Carson Steele, which is funny because with the exception of Helaire, every running back on this board I had some interest in during their pre-draft process. I don't love the fact that they all ended up on the same roster, so it's not great, but I think Pacheco is the interesting one here. I feel like I don't know if he has the highest ceiling, and he scares me that they could just replace him. I don't know if they will, but I don't know. I have some shares of him. I'm a little scared of him. I don't know what to make out of him. What do you think?
I think he's got his role set in that lineup. I think the guys that they brought in actually mimic him a little bit. Imani Bailey is kind of a same style runner as Pacheco is, the hard smash mouth down the middle stuff. I think he'd be a replacement for Pacheco if Pacheco were to get down. He has a hard running style, so there is that potential for injury. I just think that Pacheco got his stage set. There's nobody on that lineup that I'm thinking is going to just come in and take the job from him. And in reality, there's Deneric Prince, who, he's coming off a shaky rookie season. He was a speedster. He did perform well at the combine, and he spent last season with the Chiefs. He focused on special teams. He's poised to have a expanded role headed into this year, but it's going to be tough for him to smash that lineup. I see another guy that it could have a potential here. He's looking at making the roster as a special teamers, and that's Louis Rees-Zammit, and he's a former Welsh rugby star. He has some professional development already. He knows how to be a pro, so I don't think it's going to take him all that long, and he's getting really high acclaims from the coaching staff right now on special teams, and he could be a guy that could end up in that third running back role for the Chiefs if he can carve himself out a role on special teams right away. He's got a really good talented, he's fast, and he can catch the ball out of the backfield. So he's kind of like a running back wide receiver hybrid. I'm not concerned of Keontae Ingram. Manny Bailey is a guy that he has shown some potential, so he's a guy I'm going to be looking at. And if Carson Steele is there, I think he might be that fullback role if they decide to bring back that type of position in the Chiefs lineup. I'm hearing rumblings that he could fill that position if they decide to use that as a baseline. But I really like Pacheco this year. I'm not so concerned about it. The way the Chiefs use their running backs, they don't care as long as they're performing. And Pacheco performed really well last year with his opportunity, and he helped shoulder the brunt of the load down the stretch when they needed him on that Super Bowl run. So I really like Pacheco this year. I'm not too concerned about him. I like his ADP too. I think he can creep into the top 12 with the opportunity. I think the Chiefs are going to be in a lot more scoring opportunities this year, and they like using him in the red zone quite a bit. I think he had a really high percentage of the red zone opportunities for the Chiefs last year. So I think there's a lot of upside there. So I'm not as concerned, but I see where you're coming from. I mean, these undrafted, these late round drafted running backs, they're not loyal to them, most teams, but I think it's a little bit different in the Chiefs right now, especially seeing their depth.
I don't necessarily know if I'm concerned. And if I am, It's not a reflection of Pacheco, and it's not a reflection of fear of the players behind him. It's just seeing this over and over again. Like if we had gone back a year and a half and said, well, hey, Damian Pierce owners, is anyone afraid of Devin Singletary? They'd have been like, you're out of your fucking mind. And I mean, so especially with the thing that concerns me most, and I don't even think he's a good running back, is how much capital they put into Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And I'm just worried that they feel like they're forced to justify making their stupid pick here by giving him more than he deserves. In the end, I don't think it will happen. I think it's Pacheco's backfield. It's a situation where, after this year, if he has another good season, I'll be all in. It's just, it could be even 4 games in. It's just one of these situations where I hate these day 3 or undrafted running backs. It just rarely works out in the second year, and their one blow-up season tends to be their only good season. Well, what did we see with James Robinson? Like, James Robinson went from fantasy savior. He saved me, he won me leagues as an undrafted free agent, and then 3 years later, he's out of the NFL, and he was on 6 teams last year. So I don't expect it to happen, but anything is possible. That's probably why their discount. We will move on to a new look wide receiver room here, a pretty lengthy wide receiver room. Hollywood Brown, wide receiver 51 last year, going as 39 this year. Rashee Rice was 24, going as 37 because of all the legal issues, obviously. He could be another Alvin Kamara situation where we know a suspension is going to happen, but maybe it doesn't happen this year, so maybe by the discount. We can talk about that later. Rookie Xavier Worthy's going at 42. Kadarius Toney is somehow still being drafted because he does have that 200-yard potential if he's ever on the field. We have Sky Moore, who was my ultimate miss. He was in his draft class. He was the guy I loved. I don't know how he's become such a failure here, but it breaks my heart. Justin Watson, Mecole Hardman, Justin Ross, and Nico Remigio. What are your thoughts here on a lengthy wide receiver depth chart?
I think it's a lot better than it was last year. I'll tell you that much. They've got a ton more speed now on the outside. They're going to have that field stretching wide receiver in Marquise Brown or Xavier Worthy, depending on who is going to be getting the more playing time. And my hunch says that Hollywood Brown is going to be the guy that's going to get the run of the mill here. I think it's going to take some time for Worthy to get assimilated with that Chiefs offense. It's tough on rookies for the most part. And I think it would have been the same deal with Rashi Rice last year if he wasn't forced into action. If they weren't forced to use him, I think they would have used him a little bit more sparingly, especially down the stretch. I don't see Xavier Worthy coming in and playing like over 50% of the snaps to start. Like I see him gaining steam as the year goes on, and potentially if Rashi Rice does end up getting suspended, it would be him taking over from there. And it doesn't look like it's going to happen at the beginning of the year like a lot of people had thought it would be, and that's why people were steaming Xavier Worthy really early in the draft stage now. But I don't see it happening, especially with Rashi Rice's situation. I love that. I love the new weapons that Mahomes has. It's going to really open up the middle of the field. I think this really does good things for Rashi Rice. They're going to have less design plays for him off the line. I think there's going to be a lot more open space up in the middle for him and Travis Kelce. Just giving them that little extra speed down the line, I think is going to really open things up for the Chiefs. And I like this wide receiver room. I don't think there's going to be a huge alpha in this room. If you were to ask me who's going to lead the team in targets, full season, if they were all playing, I would say Rashi Rice was going to lead the Chiefs in targets in that wide receiver room, followed by Hollywood Brown and then Xavier Worthy afterwards. But it really all looms on that Rashi Rice suspension, and I don't think it's going to happen in 2024. If not, it won't be. I mean, there hasn't been any sort of legal situation happening just yet, so it's going to be dragged on, I think. And if it does happen, I think it'll be at the start of 2025. But I mean, it's hard to tell.
Yeah, it's certainly an interesting wide receiver room. I have some shares of a few of these guys. Hollywood Brown, not a terrible price. Rashi Rice has had a discount, and I'm just buying in under the assumption that maybe the suspension doesn't happen this year. Xavier Worthy, I don't have a lot of shares of. I find he's going a little earlier than I would like. But aside from that, I think I have one share of Tony just as a dart throw in a deep format. And I have Sky Moore on a couple of stash squads or taxi squads here where I'm just a glutton for punishment.
What really interests me, though, is that, because Kadarius Toney was used, they were looking to keep him as a kick returner, and now they're using Xavier Worthy a little bit more in that role at this stage in the preseason. So that'll be an interesting thing to look at, because if Kadarius Toney can't work himself out a role in special teams, I can't see him being a long-term solution in that Chiefs offense because of that.
We've got another not so tough position. It's tight end. Travis Kelce finished as the 3 last year, going as the 2 this year. Noah Gray, Jared Wiley, Irv Smith Jr. So he's got some talent behind him should he retire. But for this year, I think he's obviously a top 3, 5, whatever you want to see him. He's a set him and forget him. I don't know what you want to say here. There's not a whole lot to say.
No, not at all. I think Kelsey's going to have a really good bounce back year. He's coming back a little bit more healthy. There's going to be more weapons around him. He's not going to have to play every single down, so he's going to have a little bit more energy, especially down the stretch here if he can stay healthy. I just really like this situation, and with the burners, I really think it's going to open up a lot up the middle for Kelsey, where he's not going to have to work so hard to get that separation. I think he's going to see less double teams now as well. So things are looking really up for Kelsey, and I wouldn't be surprised if he finished as a tight end 1 overall again. He's not far off. For points per game last year, he was number 1, and I don't see that falling off this year, especially now with the weapons around Patrick Mahomes.
Yep. All right. So moment of truth. 1 target and 1 avoid based on their current price on this roster.
Well, I'm going to target Rashi Rice based off of everything that's around him. Like you mentioned, too, there's a lot of uncertainty there. So I think a lot of fantasy managers are afraid of him. And my avoid is Xavier Worthy, like I mentioned. He's going pretty high in that range. Wide receiver 3, high end wide receiver 3, low end wide receiver 4. Like that's a little too rich for my blood in a rookie coming into a crowded room with that playbook. And he didn't participate fully in OTAs either because of an injury. So a lot of things looming. So I think he's going to be a step behind learning that playbook. And I think they're going to take it, cautionary with him, especially if they have all their pieces around him. So that's my kind of buy and sell there.
All right, let's close it up with some schedule talk here. I will run through each game, and you just tell me if they're a winner or a loser. The bar is set pretty high by some homer picks. I think you need 13 wins to make the playoffs in the AFC at this point, so we'll see how it goes. Week 1, home against the Ravens.
I'm going to say they're going to either lose one of the first 2 games this year, so I'm going to say it's going to be against the Ravens, and they're going to lose week 1.
Week 2, home to the Bengals.
I think they take the Bengals. They're going to either win one of those 2 games. I think they win against the Bengals. They're going to be angry, and they have a home game. And I think that's the right call there.
Week 3 at Atlanta.
They are going to go in Atlanta and beat them.
All right. Week 4 at the Chargers.
They are going to beat the Chargers.
Week 5, home to the Saints.
So they're at home against the Saints, and they are going to beat them.
Going into the bye, you have them at 4-1. Coming out, they're at San Fran.
This is a tough stretch for them. They got at San Fran, at Raiders. So I'm going to say they come out of the bye and they beat the 49ers. Andy Reid does not like to lose after buys, and they usually come out very prepared for that. But I am going to say they're going to, have a long road trip there. They're uncertain on whether they're going to stay in Kansas City, go back to Kansas City after that. So I say they lose to the Raiders like they did on Christmas Day this year.
So you have them. So you had them splitting the 2 here.
They beat the 49ers and then they lose to the Raiders.
I had it backwards for a sec. You had me confused. I'm like, did he say they beat the Niners? And you had me backwards. I had it the other way. I had them losing to the Niners and beating the Raiders. But week 9, home to the Bucks.
They beat the Bucks.
All right. Week 10, home to the Broncos.
They take that bye week and win it.
I'm like, I get it. It's an insult. Week 11 at Buffalo.
I think they lose to Buffalo that week.
Week 12 at Carolina.
They beat Carolina.
Week 13, home to the Raiders.
They get their revenge on the Raiders.
Week 14, home to the Chargers.
They beat the Chargers.
15, at the Browns.
I think they lose to the Browns in Cleveland. I think that's going to be a very tough matchup.
16, home to the Texans.
I think they beat the Texans at home. I don't think the dome type team is going to fare well in Arrowhead.
Week 17 at the Steelers.
Well, I think that this is going to be a pivotal game for them because they're going to be probably within the AFC Championship, looking for the AFC. I know we got to keep this short, but I'm going to say they need to win that game. So I think they beat the Steelers.
And they close it out at Denver.
You bet. And they beat Denver.
All right, so you have them as a 12-win team, tied with 19 other teams and 12 wins, apparently. So it's going to be a fun year. Every team wins 12 games somehow. Well, thank you for joining me, Mike. Before we get out of here, you want to take another second quickly to plug you and where we can find you?
Yeah, you can find me on X at FFCanuck99. You can find me all over the place on Player Profiler, The Undroppables, and Fantasy Football Advice Network. So find my stuff there. Aaron, thanks a lot for having me. You're a gracious host. I appreciate the time you took to hang out with me today.
Yeah, I appreciate you joining me, man. It was great. Thank you. We made good time. Not too bad here. Another 12-win team. It was 12 wins. So if you want to see the entire Chiefs page, head over to fantasyfootballuniverse.com. Check back tomorrow. We have Tim Riley with the Los Angeles Rams. Thank you to Mike for joining me, and thank you all for tuning in. Take care. We will see you next time.